Hi y'all! Happy Easter! I'm Louis' son. Welcome to my channel where we talk about law of attraction, vibration, and becoming the deliberate creator of your life experience. I'm actually filming this video on the Monday before Easter because I'm going to be traveling to see family and for some work stuff. But on that note, and because it's Easter, some of us are busy, whatever's going on, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about myself and try to pepper in some vibrational information that I hope you kind of benefit from. If not, I just hope that you enjoy me talking about this. I guess I'll start with why I became interested in doing this work. It's because I find it, first of all, and most fundamentally, it literally feels the absolute best to me. I feel the best while I'm doing it, especially while I'm writing. And I feel like it allows me the greatest positive momentum and affects my life experience in so many really beneficial ways. A little bit less fundamental than that is that I find it to be the sort of truest lens to like perceive reality through. Some people find it to be all hooey. Some people find it, whatever, kind of true. Some people take it too far. But I feel like the practical sort of thoughts create reality, vibration, focus on emotion sort of way of perceiving explains so much about life and is a lens through which you can see everything. And I don't think there's anything out there that anything else out there that acknowledges what I feel to be, and explains, what I feel to be the fundamental thing that drives reality. And to be something that can improve your life, teach you about life, explain life, create life. Like I said, I find it to be the truest. And then after that, it has genuinely improved my life experience on an internal and external level. It helped me get out of so many very dark places, and I don't want to describe it as getting out of a dark place, but getting into a place that dark place inspired, and in a real and genuine way. It allows me to be myself in a way that no other sort of philosophical lens of reality lets me be. And like I said, it has helped me break patterns of thought that underlie mental illness that I've dealt with, addictions that I've dealt with. I don't want to say that I'm completely healed. I don't really even like that term that much because I see healing and coming into well-being as an ongoing process. And not that we don't ever evolve, but I do think that we move past patterns of thought that underlie the symptomology of mental illness. And on that note, I believe what I found to underlie my mental illness, sort of very core beliefs, and my response to those core beliefs. Better said, my response to knowing that those core beliefs are not true. That is sort of what created the symptoms of my mental illness and created obviously a lot of problems in my life, including how I compensated for that through addiction and through my main compensatory desires was the desire for the approval specifically of people that I choose to be close to me. And it used to be the biggest issue with that is that I used to choose people who demand that you work for their approval. And those personalities do not mesh well with me. I don't think they're helpful personalities. I see how there's positive aspects of them, especially in our society and in leadership roles and whatnot. But yeah, and then the other one was the desire to be seen as right, which is the same as approval, but it's about your perspective of things. And it's different than the desire to be right and to affirm yourself and to validate yourself in your own perspective, in the sense that it's about other people approving that. So yeah, practically it helped me move past a lot of those patterns, and it's not that those patterns don't come up anymore, it's just that they're a lot more dulled and I'm able to redirect my focus a lot more quickly to the things that I do want in my reality and to move my energy in that direction rather than reading into things so much. But yeah, I think what caused my mental illness, besides just those patterns of thought, which were the most fundamental things, of course, and coming from childhood, not to go too far back, but it led to a mental breakdown after becoming very successful as a kid in all-star cheerleading, which is the type of cheerleading where we just learn our skills, practice our routine, and compete. It's a very high-intensity sport, and it requires everybody to not only partake in the team, but to be their best selves within the team to a certain degree so people wouldn't get seriously injured. This actually is explained in my book. And like I said, I really excelled in this endeavor to the point where it really confused everybody when I stopped. If any of you that I used to cheer with are watching this, hopefully this explains a little bit to you. But practically, I didn't, because, not only is it normal, but it was also very normalized in my family, and sort of insecurity was really beaten into our heads, like in a lot of families. It was mainly a method of compensating for that and proving myself. But I did learn two very important and spiritual things from that. And probably a lot more, but one was the sensation of source energy coursing through me, and how once I got accustomed to that energy, it was almost like my mind was creating, especially the tumbling, which is what I really excelled at, created it without really much effort at all. And the way that how much I excelled over people that were in it for years from the time that they were a kid, and I'm not shitting on them, a lot of them were wonderful and really great. But the thing is, the way I excelled past them was obviously partially due to me being a male, but also I think the biggest component was how much I loved doing it. Regardless of the impurities within that desire, I think that I just genuinely loved it. And it was so much fun. And because of that, it tuned me into that life force energy and allowed me to progress. And I think that explains the discrepancy between myself and other people. It did not feel like I was working hard, though through other people's eyes, I'm sure that's what they thought. And it only became hard work when I started losing interest in it, but stayed in it anyways. And that's when it became hard work. But it was not hard work. No matter how hard or difficult or crazy any of the skills I was doing, it was not hard work. It did not feel that way. And this is another reason why I got into what I did, got into law of attraction and stuff like that, because it was, even though it was such a physical task, there was such an energetic and mental component to it. And the other thing that it brought me to was the sensation of unity between my teammates and I, and especially two squads that I was on throughout my years. This level of closeness we had transcended us trying to win competitions and get better together. It was truly unconditional love, and we weren't even that super successful either one of these years, but the way that I felt and the connection that I built and just the way it felt when we were performing together, it was like this pulsation of and I think that is another thing that led me to it. I guess that leads me into what happened after my mental breakdown, and what was the next step that led me into this. The first thing that I got interested in when I quit cheer was raving, which started off as actual raves where you have to call for an address, and the vibes there were immaculate, especially because they were such small events, And I think there was just these peak hours of the night, and it wouldn't happen every time, where it was just like everybody was unified. And then after that, as the actual rave scene died down, I started going to shows and festivals for artists that I was very, very interested in. And I got good at picking out what subgenres and what artists to go to find that vibe. And again, I think the way it mimicked, but on a larger scale, being on a cheer team, and what's very interesting is the subgenre called trance music, is specifically uplifting trance, is at the same BPM that most cheer music is. So I think that's another aspect of what got me into that. And just after my mental breakdown, I had my spiritual awakening, where I just sort of like recognized that there was a cause to everything, regardless of if we can figure out what that cause is or not. And that, like, in that sense, life is perfect. Instead of perfect meaning that you have all desired outcomes, it meant that there was like a perfect cause to everything, even though I didn't really understand at that time that the fundamental cause of everything is focus or thought, or energy. Well, I guess the cause to phenomena, like different phenomena, rather than the central cause of life, which I awakened to later on. And this gets me into the 4 significant experiences I had of being in resonance with what I like to call unconditionality or source energy, on like a conscious level. Which the spiritual awakening was the most significant one, and it lasted the longest, and it obviously is what genuinely shifted my perspective the most. But the first one happened when I was about 10, and I was on the bus. I was a loner, but not necessarily bullied. I was just very attentive, and I am gay, and I didn't realize this until I was about 23. I was bisexual when I was about 18, starting then, but I think the combination of those things just made me different, and people could tell, and I could tell, and like I said, I wasn't really bullied, except for maybe a little bit when I was in cheer, but I actually kind of got popular then. And so I was sitting on the bus waiting to go home, and I was like thinking about, like, what am I doing here? You know, I don't really have any friends. I wasn't feeling sad, but just like kind of discouraged and disappointed about life. And it felt like hard for me because I wanted to do good in school. I used to get really bad headaches even at like 8 years old. But anyways, I was just like, what am I doing here? And I chilled out, relaxed into that question, and a feeling of peace washed over me. And I had the thought occur to me, well, I'm here, so I'm supposed to be, which deepened that sense of peace. And I think that that was my first like significant experience of being in resonance with it and knowing what it was. And then after that is when I got into cheer, got very popular, and then the mental breakdown ensued when I stayed in cheer a little bit too long. I wanted to quit about 2 years before I actually did, but I didn't, because I was more concerned with proving myself, and I didn't really appreciate those 2 things that I learned. And then that led to me having my spiritual awakening, which is everything I explained, but it also gave me this like rebelliousness towards, you know, the norms in our society that are based in like proving yourself and being better than other people, which I find to be compensatory for feelings of insecurity. Even though it's so normal, I know a lot of people are gonna not really like to hear that if you're not really in tune with this work, or if you're like a big believer in like competitiveness, which I am to a certain degree, but I have a different perspective of it. I'll probably talk about that in a later video when I talk about compensatory desires in depth. But yeah, it gave me this rebelliousness towards that. And I remember my first sort of channeled guidance being, think with simplicity, live with passion, invent your world. But ultimately, I just came to know that life is more than physical, and that whatever religion says about non-physicality, A lot of it might be true, a lot of it is untrue, but the whole notion of proving yourself and working hard and obeying rules, that I knew wasn't pure good information. So that also cleared out a lot of that religious dogma as well. Oh, I forgot the second one. Actually, the second one, I was in my backyard, and it was actually the summer that I wanted to quit cheer, but didn't. I was in my backyard, and I was talking on the phone to one of my former teammates. She actually quit that year. And I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I was using marijuana, and this was when I first started. And I think I was about 15. Yikes. But I was just like, how do we know that reality is actually real? Like, I just had this sense of like reality not being real. And the significance of this experience, I think, was to show me that the human game of proving yourself and being better than other people, etc., is fallacious. That is surreal. And I think the other thing that it was teaching me, and I became conscious of this way later on, like I'm talking within the last 5 years or so, and it just made me I think what I realized on like a deeper spiritual level is that life doesn't have to exist. It just does, and it just is. In other words, life is an expression. I'm going to cover this later on. And this is like ultimately why you shouldn't take life too seriously, and ultimately why you shouldn't take life seriously at all. And that is to be distinct from, not having anything that's important to you or not having desires. But yeah, so that was actually the second. The bigger spiritual awakening was the third. And then the fourth was, I was cruising around and I was on a microdose of LSD. And I was thinking to myself, because I was in kind of the throes of my mental illness at this point, and I was just thinking, like, what is there to be confident in? Like, I don't know, like, what fundamental thing, because, like, I've done the whole, like, proving myself and achieving a lot and succeeding a lot, and that really didn't fulfill me in a real way. And then I just relaxed into that question, and I was just thinking about life, and, like, looking at the trees as I was driving past them. Again, I was on a microdose, and I was just thinking, like, life just evolves. It naturally does. There's this thing within me that wants well-being. And it's like life, even though there are unwanted things, even though there are some things that aren't beautiful, from our perspective, it's like life is loving itself. It's becoming, it's trying its best. It's doing the best it can. I don't like the word trying. It's doing the best it can to do goodness for itself. There's almost no words to describe this. It's the sort of unknowable reason that Hermetists talk about that underlies the becoming and the life force energy of life. So yeah, that was when I kind of understood what I believe God to be, unconditional love. So those were the 4 significant experiences. And like I said, I was in the throes of my mental illness at this point, and it wasn't for another 2 years later that I would figure out that, like, I had been, like, seriously manipulated by people for a very long time, and I was friends with a lot of people who weren't that for me. And this isn't to say that they shouldn't have been in my life at all, but, like, it was people that I was seeking the approval of, and people that demand approval and demand that you obey them, demand that you please them because they feel like they can't do it for themselves. And I was sort of a human doormat. And when I became conscious of this like released this repressed anger, and it felt so relieving. Oh my God, it's like my head was above water for the first time. And this wasn't truly, and I'm not saying that I never experienced alignment, because I started tasting it more and more after that experience of, like, understanding what I think God is. I started tasting more and more alignment, but that eventually led me to recognizing, well, what is creating this stagnancy in my life, and why do my relationships suck? Why do I suck in them? Why am I generally pretty miserable? And I found information about narcissism and manipulation and complex PTSD, and it just opened this door for me. And I held on to that resentment and anger for a while because it felt so much better, and I think I needed to, because my anger was so repressed and so directed at myself for so long that I wasn't allowing myself to even recognize when I didn't like what somebody did, or I didn't like a relationship I was in, or I didn't like a certain person. It was just awesome. But like I said, I held onto it for too long, and it played in with my mental illness, of course. But it eventually led me to creating some deeply confusing experiences in my personal life, in my just choices I was making. It made me very unstable, somewhat, manic, and it created very confusing experiences in my relationships. So ultimately, I think without this vibrational work, I don't want to say it would be impossible, but it gave me a good basis to understand why and how those relationships and situations were created, and to also give me a path of creating something better and having a new mindset and a new life. And because they were very nuanced situations. On the surface, they might have seemed somewhat obvious, but I knew deep down my intuition was telling me, like, there's a deeper truth about this that you're not recognizing. And it started teaching me about, like, different fundamental ways that people go about life, fundamental intentions that they have, and why I could have a relationship with somebody that we shared a lot of interests, or we even had a good time a lot of times, but when it came right down to it, our difference in, like, fundamental intentions and understandings of reality and fundamental values ended up creating huge clashes. And having that clarity really taught me that. And then also it led me to this place where it helps me realize, like, I can't keep holding on to this resentment. It's destroying my life. And it helped me learn to stop pushing against other people, even when they're not that for me, or when they do something that I find to be really deeply manipulative or crappy. I know that holding on to it and pushing against it and pushing against myself for how I respond to it and everything is not going to help. That's when I learned what non-resistance is and started genuinely improving in my most difficult area of life, which was relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but especially friendships too, and family stuff too. But since then, it took I would say 4 years since I started discovering the whole manipulation thing and released my repressed anger before I became clear and guided, and my book Unconditionality was inspired within me. And since then, it's like I got my I had a northern star since I spiritually awakened, but I didn't know what it was until then. And I knew, and my book helped me return to well-being or heal in a very big way. And I just really comprehended the notion of law of attraction and the notion of thoughts creating reality, and how energy and vibration works so clearly. And it's been growing in clarity and helping me soothe the patterns underlying my mental illness and my addictions. And yeah, so that is pretty much, I guess, everything that I want to cover. I guess other than, here we go. I mean, I really like to cook. I love to travel. I love nature. I love going to festivals, specifically trance and bass, or like Wookiee, dubsteppy kind of music. Those are like my absolute favorite things. I love to write. I don't love to read that much, to be honest, unless it's something that's really relevant to me or something that I really wanted to read. But I think that's because I'm a writer. So, but ultimately, I hope that me explaining all of this taught you a little bit. I hope it made you feel like you got to know me a little bit. And helped you understand why I'm doing this. And I really, really hope that this channel provides you with information that really improves your life experience. I really hope you buy my book and benefit from that as well. And yeah, I don't know exactly where this is going to lead me. I know that I enjoy making content like this. I love writing. I plan to create more books. Maybe in the future I'll start doing like seminar type things, starting with one-on-one sessions on the phone or video calls. We'll just see where this goes. But yeah, I knew once I started really writing this book, I kind of knew I wanted to do this ever since I found Abraham and Jerry's work with, Jerry and Esther's work with Abraham, which inspired my teachings a lot, if you can't tell. I hope to expand on what they do, flesh it out a little more, expand on it, get more specific. I don't know if I'm channeling per se, but I do feel like I'm receiving information from a very high vibration. It's very clear. It helps me. A lot of people find it insightful in my life. So yeah, this is why I want to do this. This is kind of how I'm starting it, and this is how I got here. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good Easter, and I hope that, well, this took time from your day in a very beneficial way. I love you guys. Have a good week.